Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. In the Harry Potter universe, there are several magical schools, but one of the most refined and mysterious is undoubtedly Beauxbatons, the French Academy of Magic, wrapped in the scent of rose gardens and the mystique of the Pyrenees, holds many secrets. Today, I'll reveal little-known facts about this enchanting school. And yes, you're in for some surprises. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Music. During dinner, a must. When the Beauxbatons delegation arrived at Hogwarts in the Goblet of Fire, they impressed everyone not only with their grand carriage, but also with a full-blown performance. French wizards don't just eat, they do it with flair. During meals at Beauxbatons, live music is played by none other than nymphs. Yes, real nymphs, whose enchanting voices accompany the students' dining experience. At the Academy, art is considered magic, and music is meant to be a part of every wizard's daily life. Number 2. Architecture as a work of art. If Hogwarts is known for its Gothic style, dark hallways and looming towers, Beauxbatons is pure luxury. Its architecture is a blend of Versailles opulence and fairy tale charm. With funding from European alchemists, the school grounds have become a masterpiece of design. Enchanted fountains, mirror-like ponds, manicured parks, pink marble staircases. Everything radiates style and harmony. Here, luxury isn't shunned, it's celebrated as a tribute to the magical arts. Number 3. Student geography, not just France. Although Beauxbatons is located in France, it doesn't limit its student body to the French. The school is open to talented young witches and wizards from all across Western Europe. Among its students, you might find children from Spain, Portugal, Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and even parts of Italy. In that sense, Beauxbatons is similar to Durmstrang. Neither school confines itself to one nation. Magic knows no borders. Number 4. Founding late 13th century. Beauxbatons is one of the oldest magical schools in existence. It was founded in the late 13th century, a time when Europe's magical community faced great danger: the Inquisition, persecution, and witch hunts. The school became a refuge and sanctuary for many witches and wizards. Legend tells of a student named Vincent Duc de Trèfle-Pique, who escaped the French Revolutionary guillotine by using an invisibility amulet and faking his death. Beauxbatons has always been a haven for those who possessed magic, but couldn't openly practice it. Number 5. Breaking all the rules of magical transportation. When Beauxbatons students arrived at Hogwarts, they did it in style, in a massive blue carriage pulled by giant winged horses. These creatures feed exclusively on single malt whiskey. No, that's not a metaphor. Due to its size and spectacle, the carriage frequently causes problems. It has been spotted by muggles multiple times, breaching the international statute of secrecy. The French Ministry of Magic has received numerous fines over the years, but whoever said true elegance had to go unnoticed? Number 6. The school's real location. Unlike the secretive Durmstrang, Beauxbatons doesn't hide quite as much. The school is located in the Pyrenees, the mountain range straddling the border between France and Spain. It's cleverly disguised as an ancient abbey and surrounded by natural protective enchantments. Snow-capped peaks and green valleys create a truly magical landscape. On a clear day, one can even glimpse the silvery sea from above. The energy of this place is pure and powerful. Number 7. The name's etymology, not so simple. Like many names in the Harry Potter world, Beauxbatons is a clever play on words. The most obvious explanation comes from the French Beauxbatons, meaning beautiful wands. This may be an allusion to the elegance of the French school where beauty and magic go hand in hand. A wand here is not just a tool, but an extension of one's aesthetic, philosophy, and even manners. Number 8. School uniform mystery. The uniforms at Beauxbatons are not simply clothes, they are spells stitched into silk. Pale blue and soft as mist, each robe is tailored to move like breath, not fabric. Enchanted to warm in winter and cool in summer, the robes adjust to the wearer's needs without a single charm cast aloud. The original design came from Isabeau de Mignard, a Beauxbatons student in 1382 who crafted the first climate-sensitive cloak after nearly freezing during a skywatching lesson. Her robes became legend. Today, a statue of her stands near the tailor's tower, holding a needle made of starlight. Madame Vivienne Fay, current mistress of garment enchantments, inspects every robe by hand before the school year begins. "No thread leaves this tower dull," she often says. Her apprentices work under moonlight, claiming the silk sings as it's sewn. Some robes even adapt to emotional shifts, glowing softly during moments of pride or grief. In 2015, a student named Oriane Lemoine wore a robe that turned silver during her final charms exam. It wasn't the spell that lit the room, her professor wrote, but her robe. It shimmered like dawn. Number 9. Forbidden Duels. Duels are forbidden at Beauxbatons. The rule has stood since 1763 after a duel between two upperclassmen ended in death. The victim was Julien Marchais, a prodigy in elemental magic. He collapsed under a misfired spell meant to disarm. His opponent, Amadeo Virel, was expelled, but the stain remained. Ever since, the Academy has treated aggression as failure. "Power without control," said headmistress Sylvie Delacour in her memoirs, "is a fire without walls." Instead of dueling halls, students are taught negotiation and non-violent spells. Even defensive magic must be cast with care. Professor Giraud, who teaches charms, tells her pupils, "If you can win a battle by lifting your wand, you've already lost the greater war." Still, the tradition of the duel has not fully died. Students whisper about secret meetings in the lower cliffs of the Pyrenees. They call it La Nuit Silencieuse, the silent night. No lights, no judges, only sparks in the dark. In 2007, a student named Bastien Clément returned from one such duel with a broken wand and burns across his right hand. He refused to speak about it, but later carved into his dorm wall, "Some truths are learned through fire." That year, the staff increased patrols along the forest paths, but the forest is large, and ambition, at Beauxbatons, has never been easy to silence. Number 10, the ghostly lady of Beauxbatons. She appears when the moon is full, gliding silently through the marble halls of Beauxbatons. Madame Céleste, once a beloved professor of astronomy in the 15th century, now drifts in silver mist, her eyes glowing with a soft blue light. Students claim she smells faintly of lavender and parchment. Her story is passed down in whispers, how she died shielding her class from a collapsing spell during a rare planetary alignment. No one speaks of the caster, only of her final words. "The stars will guide you, even when I cannot." Madame Céleste never speaks unless she must, but when she does, her voice is cold and calming. One night in 1998, a first-year student named Elodie Roussel lost her way after curfew. Panicked and near tears, she stumbled into an unfamiliar corridor where portraits wouldn't answer. Celeste appeared in the doorway, pointed silently toward the stairs, and vanished. Elodie made it back unharmed. A week later, she found a star chart beside her bed with a note. "North is never lost to those who seek with heart." It was written in 15th century ink. The ghost is drawn to uncertainty. Those struggling with doubt or grief often see her near the observatory tower, gazing up at the stars she once taught. Headmistress Maxime once admitted in private correspondence to Dumbledore, "Celeste is more than a spirit. She is our conscience. She appears when we forget who we are meant to become." She doesn't like liars. In 2003, a boy faked a vision for attention. That night, all the stars disappeared from his astronomy charts. His telescope turned to frost. For a week, his dreams were filled with falling stars and whispering wind. No punishment was ever given. Celeste had already handled it. Number 11, Alchemy in the Curriculum. The walls of the alchemy wing at Beauxbatons hum with secrets older than the castle itself. Inside, beneath vaulted ceilings and floating orbs of soft light, students learn to transform more than just matter. They learn to balance fire with patience, gold with restraint, and ambition with silence. The curriculum is demanding, no shortcuts, no luck. As Professor Lucien Valeur once told his class, alchemy does not grant you power, it reveals what you are willing to lose to gain it. The pride of Beauxbatons is its connection to Nicolas Flamel. A portrait of the famed alchemist hangs above the central cauldron in the Grand Lab, his eyes always watching. Flamel graduated in 1347, and legend says he once returned during a lunar eclipse to hide a vial of elixir of life somewhere on the grounds. His notebook, Sur les secrets de la transformation vraie, is used in advanced studies, though some pages remain blank, until the right student opens them. One such student was Mireille Genet, who in 1979 recreated the elusive sapphire salt, a compound that could preserve magical objects for centuries. "It came to me in a dream," she later wrote, "but the lab made it real." The salt now protects the stained glass ceiling above the school's chapel, preserving its color from both time and spell damage. Mireille later became a lead artificer at Gringotts' secret vault division, designing locks no spell can break. Students aren't allowed in the lab alone. Accidents happen. Once a fifth-year boy tried synthesizing a laughing stone using unmeasured mercury. The explosion coated half the west corridor in glowing mist for 3 days. Still, the risk is part of the lesson. Alchemy is not safe, says Professor Valeur, but neither is magic, and Beauxbatons teaches both with elegance and danger in equal parts. Number 12. Magical Gardens and Secret Ingredients. Tucked behind the rose marble corridors of Beauxbatons lies a garden unlike any other in the wizarding world. It begins like an ordinary grove, with silver-leaved trees and fountains humming soft lullabies. But farther in, hidden beneath layers of protective enchantments, bloom the rarest magical plants in Europe. Access is tightly controlled. Only the most gifted herbology students may enter. One such student was Camille d'Artois, who in 1985 cultivated the first moon petal ever grown outside of controlled ministry vaults. "It bloomed under starlight," she wrote in her journal, "and when I touched it, I could hear the plant breathe." Moon petal is no ordinary flower. Its petals shimmer like frost and vanish in daylight. The elixirs made from it can reverse venom, mend shattered bones, and even delay magical decay. But its magic is delicate. Mishandling it causes it to wilt into dust. Potions, Master Thierry Blanchard once said, you do not command moon petal, you earn its trust. Today, the original moon petal bush still grows beneath a crystal dome in the Eastern Garden, tended only by fourth-year apprentices under Madame Émile Rousseau's supervision. The garden also conceals other mysteries. Whisperroot, a plant that grows only when spoken to kindly, was discovered there in 1742. When brewed into tea, it reveals truths hidden in memory. Beauxbatons uses it sparingly, mostly for restorative therapy after trauma. "It speaks only to the broken," said Madame Rousseau, "and only if they whisper back." One student, Etienne Noir, claimed it helped him remember a spell lost to his family for generations. The enchantments guarding the garden are ancient and alive. The soil itself reacts to intent. Trespassers find the paths shift beneath their feet. One boy who tried sneaking in to steal a golden thistle for a love potion was found asleep for 3 days beneath a weeping vine. His hair had turned blue, and he spoke in riddles for a week. As Madame Maxime once told her herbology class, a garden is not just a place of growth, it is a place of judgment. Number 13, Beauxbatons and Magical Politics. Beauxbatons has always moved like a shadow behind the curtains of magical politics. It never declared allegiance, but its influence was unmistakable. Many of its graduates now sit at the highest levels of the French Ministry of Magic. One of them, Aurélien Marchand, became head of magical law enforcement in 1992. He once told La Gazette Enchantée, "Beauxbatons doesn't raise soldiers, it raises minds sharp enough to end wars before they begin." During the Second Wizarding War, Beauxbatons publicly claimed neutrality. Behind its elegant facade, however, the school quietly resisted Voldemort's rise. Its infirmary housed over 60 injured witches and wizards, victims of Death Eater attacks along the Channel. Madame Laroche, the school's chief healer, led a team of students in secret night missions across northern France, delivering supplies and healing wounds. "They came to us with curses I hadn't seen in 50 years, she said, in a sealed court testimony years later. "We didn't ask where they'd been, we only asked what they needed." The International Confederation of Wizards was no stranger to Beauxbatons graduates. Delphine Miraut, class of 1971, became one of its youngest delegates. During the 1994 Tri-Wizard tournament, she sat beside Dumbledore and Igor Karkaroff, her face unreadable. In one rare letter found in Dumbledore's archives, he described her as a diplomat of silk and steel, never louder than a whisper, but always heard. It is said that Headmistress Maxime herself orchestrated many of the school's covert acts during the war. Though she travelled to Hogsmeade and fought alongside Hagrid, her greatest weapon was the quiet network she left behind. One of her students, Léon Bisset, created enchanted parchment that allowed messages to travel between safe houses undetected. "We never took up arms," he later said, "but in silence we held the line." Number 14, The Legend of the Magic Library. At the very heart of Beauxbatons, hidden beneath a silver dome laced with runes, stands the legendary library known simply as La Bibliothèque Ancienne. It is said that its collection rivals, and even surpasses, the great library of Hogwarts. Shelves spiral upward like trees, each holding books older than the castle itself. These are not ordinary texts. They whisper, they glow, some bite. Others vanish the moment you reach for them. The air smells of ancient paper and lavender ink, and the silence is so deep it presses against your chest. Only a few students have ever stepped beyond its blue glass doors. One of them was Eliane Fournier, a top alchemy student in 1947. She was granted access for her work on the etheric distillation of memory. After only 5 days inside, she emerged pale and changed. Her project won global acclaim, but she never returned. "The books," she told her headmistress, "speak truths we are not always meant to carry." A week later, she left Beauxbatons forever, choosing a quiet life in the Alps. The keeper of this sanctuary is Madame Héloïse de Mirval, a stern woman with silver eyes who seems older than the school itself. Rumors say she can sense a lie before it's spoken. Students claim she once turned a boy to stone for sneaking in under a disillusionment charm. Dumbledore, in a letter to Headmistress Olympe Maxime, once wrote, "Héloïse guards knowledge not with chains but with intuition. She sees beyond masks, straight into one's magical core." Inside the library lies Le Grimoire du Serin, an ancient book said to contain spells that could end all magical conflict or ignite a new war. It is locked behind crystal glass, guarded by 3 floating wands that hum when approached. No one has read it since the 17th century, when a Spanish wizard named Tomás de Luna tried and collapsed into unconsciousness. His final words were recorded by Héloïse herself. "It showed me what I could become and what I must never be." Number 15. Dance as a magical code. Of all the magical schools across Europe, Beauxbatons Academy of Magic, known in the French wizarding world as Académie de Magie Beauxbatons, has always stood apart, not just for its architectural elegance nestled in the Pyrenees, or its strict adherence to discipline, but for its unshakable belief that magic and grace are inseparable. Hidden behind its grand marble halls and soft blue silks lies a tradition both curious and profound. The Dance Codex, or as it is reverently called among its students, le Code de Danse. This peculiar and poetic discipline begins in earnest in the third year of study, a rite of passage as essential as the casting of one's first Patronus. At Beauxbatons, students are not merely taught to wield wands, but to wield themselves, their bodies becoming vessels of ancient rhythms and elemental energies. The code is not merely a curriculum, it is an initiation into the choreography of magic itself, where every step, turn, and flourish echoes the heartbeat of a forgotten era. One does not cast with the wand, Madame Delphine Rosabelle, the school's long-time etiquette mistress, once stated, but with the soul shaped through discipline and adorned by movement. The dances are drawn from an arcane book bound in midnight blue leather, passed down through generations of headmistresses since the time of the school's founder, Marie de Montmorency. The codex contains 23 distinct dances, each rooted in the magical properties of an element or ancient spellcraft. One such dance, the Pavane des Brumes, represents the element of water, graceful, elusive, flowing. Students who master it often report increased clarity in spellcasting, involving liquids, fog, and mist. The movements mimic the rolling of tides and the drifting of fog through the French valleys, each step a ripple of magic. Perhaps the most demanding of the dances is the vol du feu, the flight of fire. It is choreographed in sharp, angular sequences, abrupt spins, and intense eye contact meant to channel the ferocity of flame. Only a handful of students each decade are ever permitted to perform it during exams. Legend has it that Amélie Dervaux, a seventh-year prodigy in 1893, once performed the vol du feu with such passion that the torches lining the Hall of Mirrors lit themselves in a golden blaze before collapsing into ashes. It took 3 days and the combined effort of 7 professors to restore them. The crown jewel of the entire codex, however, is not a dance but a night, the Ball of 5 Petals. Held in the flowering gardens of Beauxbatons each spring, it is the pinnacle of elegance and mysticism. The ball takes its name from the enchanted rose that blooms in the school's inner courtyard only once a year. Each of its 5 petals represents a virtue taught at Beauxbatons: grace, power, wisdom, restraint, and devotion. At midnight, the petals detach from the bloom and float gently through the air, choosing 5 students to perform the final ceremonial dance, a mystical rite said to awaken hidden potential. Attendance at the ball is not limited to students alone. Influential witches and wizards from across France and beyond descend upon the academy in a flurry of enchanted carriages and phoenix feather capes. Diplomats, historians, spellcrafters, and members of the Ministère de la Magie watch intently, knowing that each dance is a revelation not only of magical prowess, but of character. To watch a Beauxbatons student dance, as chronicled in Élégance, Enchanted, is to glimpse the invisible forces of the universe bending to rhythm and breath. The significance of dance at Beauxbatons transcends mere spectacle. It is believed among the faculty that movement aligns the magical core of a person, their centre magique. Students are trained not only in movement, but in breath control, heartbeat synchronization, and silence between gestures. Magic exists in what you do not say, Madame Rosabelle often reminded, and sometimes in what you do not do. In the annals of Beauxbatons' long history, one tale is whispered with reverence among upper years and remembered by staff with a strange pride, the tale of Julien Marchand. A quiet, slender boy from Avignon with a fondness for shadows and little appetite for attention, Julien had been an average student by most academic standards. His spell work was passable, his theory essays neat but uninspired. Yet something changed in his 5th year when he began to study the dance codex with a zeal few had seen. Julien pored over the codex during free periods, sometimes practicing alone in the rose orchard well past curfew. He focused on a nearly forgotten sequence known as the danse de verrouillage, a locking dance once used to stabilize unstable magical fields. It was a complex choreography designed for 2 dancers, Yet Julian practiced it alone, night after night, his bare feet bruising on the dewy stone floors. In the spring of his 7th year, the ball of 5 petals approached under a peculiar shadow. A lingering curse, long dormant, had begun to awaken in the foundations of the school. Stones moaned in the night, rooms shifted places, and one student reported seeing her mirror reflection move independently. The professors whispered of a residual curse from the days of the first headmistress, an enchantment never fully neutralized. Wards had failed. Spells broke without reason. The castle was restless. That year, the petals chose their dancers as always. To the astonishment of all, Julian was among them. Draped in silver and deep violet robes, he stepped onto the moonlit platform as the music began, soft, trembling, like a secret being unfolded. And then, with no partner, he began the danse de verrouillage. His arms carved invisible runes in the air. His feet traced ancient protections along the ground. As he moved, something ancient shifted. The tremors in the floor ceased, the cold vanished, and one by one the statues lining the garden turned their heads toward him, as if watching. Number 16. Secret Underground Tunnels. Deep beneath the elegant marble floors of Beauxbatons Academy of Magic, hidden from the sunlit grandeur of the main halls and the crystal towers that rise above the Pyrenees, lie the forgotten catacombs that few dare to mention aloud. Shrouded in silence and protected by enchantments older than the school itself, these underground passages hold a presence that has whispered through centuries. Every few decades, rumors flare like wildfire among the students, tales of ghostly voices, vanishing classmates, and objects that move on their own. The professors respond with icy denial, yet every student knows there is something buried far beneath Madame Maxime's serene domain that the school refuses to acknowledge. The oldest known account of these catacombs was found in the torn diary of Lucienne Delacour, a 7th-year student from 1792, long before the modern curriculum was established. Hidden behind her pressed flowers and practice charms was a page soaked in nervous ink, where she described slipping through a narrow gap behind the statue of Melisande de Brissac. According to Lucienne, the passage was cold, lined with moss-covered stone, and carried an unnatural hum through the walls, like breath held for centuries. She had not descended alone. Her companion, Bastien Giroux, vanished that same night. His name was scratched from the rolls, and no mention of him remains in official records. But Lucienne wrote, "I saw his lantern drop first. Then I heard a voice, not Bastien's and not human. It spoke my name like a curse, and I fled." The staircase she described was later confirmed by another student, Émile Rousseau, in 1923. He claimed to have found it accidentally after knocking over a wall torch during detention. Unlike Lucienne, he ventured farther. In a letter to his brother, later confiscated by school authorities, Émile described a vaulted chamber with walls carved in Latin and Celtic runes. One mural, chipped and eroded, depicted what appeared to be a Roman wizard kneeling before a floating hourglass, his eyes wide with reverence and fear. They were not mere rooms, Émile wrote, but sanctuaries of something older than even Beauxbatons. Though the catacombs are absent from any map, the castle itself seems to remember. The floor plan of the eastern wing has changed over the centuries, not by reconstruction, but by magical reconfiguration. "There are doors that appear only on moonless nights," said Professor Vauclair, in a rare moment of candor, quoted in Beauxbatons Through the Ages. "Not even the headmistress can command them. The school has its own memory." Indeed, some believe Beauxbatons was built on the foundation of an earlier, now forgotten magical site, a Roman temple dedicated to Janus, the god of thresholds and duality. That would explain the presence of relics beneath its foundations, as well as the temporal distortions noted by students who dared to return from the catacombs. One such relic is the infamous Horloge de l'Eclipse, or the eclipse clock. Crafted, legend says, by a Roman wizard engineer Named Aurelius Varro, it is said to slow time within a radius of 10 feet for precisely 7 minutes. The artifact, according to whispered legend, rests in a locked chamber surrounded by illusions so powerful they once drove a fourth-year student mad. Her name was Céleste Duvant, and though the school denies the event, her journal, leaked by her cousin decades later, describes a realm where shadows bled across the floor and time folded like parchment. "I watched myself enter the room twice," she wrote, "and each time I screamed louder." But the most treasured and most feared of the Catacombs' contents is the Miroir de Mémoire, the mirror of memory, believed to contain the consciousness of the school's founder, Mélusine de Chavigny. Unlike the mirror of Évariste, which reveals desires, this mirror speaks only when blood is offered, specifically the blood of a witch descended from Mélusine's line. The last known interaction occurred in 1867 when Isabeau Chavigny, a proud and brilliant student, spilled a drop of blood on the mirror's glass during a ritual dare. What she saw has never been confirmed, but Isabeau abandoned magic entirely that year. She wrote only one sentence before leaving Beauxbatons forever. "She showed me what I must become, and I could not bear it." The tapestry room remains the most visually surreal corner of the underground chambers. There, ancient fabric panels, many believed to be gifts from other wizarding civilizations, hang in eternal twilight. They do not age, nor do they remain still. At night, the figures within the threads come alive. Witnesses describe duels between embroidered knights, weeping queens, and serpents that slither from one tapestry to another. One such tapestry, named Le Jugement des Étoiles, tells a shifting tale. Sometimes it depicts the founding of the school, other times it shows its burning. The fire is warm to the touch, and some say if you press your ear to the cloth, you can hear chanting in an ancient dialect. Access to these catacombs is not formally permitted. However, once every decade, during the Nuit du Voile, an old Beauxbatons tradition when the school celebrates its mythical origins, a test is quietly held. Not a written exam nor a duel, but a magical challenge of will and instinct. Those who succeed are led, blindfolded, to a stairwell that does not exist on any map. There they descend to meet the enchantments left by Mélusine herself. Only those with both courage and compassion return unchanged. "It is not about strength," Madame Maxime once said, though not publicly. "It is about knowing which secrets deserve to stay hidden." Among those chosen was Pascal Delmar, the top student of 1951, later a famed curse-breaker. In his memoir, The Last Depths, he described a chamber filled with glass orbs, each containing a frozen moment of Beauxbatons' past. He touched one, and was transported bodily and fully to the siege of the school during the Dark Century. He stood among students defending the castle with wand and flame, and when he returned, seconds had passed. He brought with him a singed handkerchief embroidered with the year 1387, now kept at the Ministry for Magical Artifacts. The incident was never explained. Pascal only said, "The catacombs are not ruins, they are memory itself." Number 17, Culinary Magic. The kitchens of Beauxbatons Academy of Magic were never merely a place of food preparation. Beneath their polished stone archways and lavender-tiled ceilings, culinary magic reached an artistic level so refined that even Hogwarts, with its majestic feasts and ever-refilling plates, would appear rustic in comparison. At Beauxbatons, food was not just sustenance, it was sorcery on a spoon, a philosophy that elevated taste, aroma, and emotion into a symphony orchestrated by wand and whisk alike. Behind the elegance of every dish served in the grand crystalline dining hall stood generations of culinary spellcasters trained not only at Beauxbatons itself, but also at the hidden École de Cuisine Magique, nestled in the Alps. There, young magical chefs like Aurélien Dufresne and Céleste Louvière spent years perfecting enchantments that could coax flavor from the blandest root or charm the scent of lilac into a loaf of bread. Every recipe was a spell book, and every ingredient a living element of transformation. They didn't just cook, they awakened dishes into life. Madame Élodie Lablanc, head of the Beauxbatons kitchen staff since 1921, was a legend even before her name became a whisper on the lips of every student. Known for her enchanted rose petal soufflé that allegedly made students recall their happiest childhood memory with every bite, she insisted that food was the purest form of empathy. "If a meal doesn't listen to your soul," she once wrote in her treatise L'âme du goût, "then it is merely warm matter, but if it sings, then you have touched true enchantment." Breakfast at Beauxbatons was a ritual of rejuvenation. Each morning, the scent of citrus and caramelized pastry floated down from the ceilings before the dishes themselves appeared on the polished moonstone tables. The croissants, golden and weightless, were imbued with a charm called revigoré, a spell that siphoned tension from the body with each flaky bite. Students swore that a single croissant from the enchanted ovens of Beauxbatons could erase a night of nightmares or the sting of a failed transfiguration exam. But the real miracle lay in the subtleties. Beneath the buttery layers, small fragments of enchanted thyme leaves were pressed by hand. These were no ordinary herbs. Cultivated in the moonlit gardens behind the arome wing, they absorbed lunar essence and silence. The result? A croissant that not only soothed the muscles but also quieted the mind, allowing clarity of thought with a touch of euphoria. Professor Delacour once confessed in Witch Weekly, "I grade my hardest essays after breakfast. It's the only time I feel kind enough." Lunch was a procession of spells so delicate that only trained gastronomical wizards could even perceive the magic. A dish called soupe des vents, wind soup, appeared to be a simple leek broth. But those who sipped it described a sudden sensation of spring breeze brushing their face, followed by an uplifting warmth in their chest. The secret lay in the incorporation of souffle charme, a rare incantation that captured the essence of air from high mountain altitudes, stored inside hollowed pepper seeds, then rehydrated with boiling broth just seconds before serving. Each flavor in a Beauxbatons meal had purpose beyond taste. Potions master Théodore Marchand partnered with the chefs to create elixirs of health and joy, often folded invisibly into sauces or glazes. His contribution to the filet du dragon de mer, an illusory fish conjured from sea salt essence and memory, ensured that students who consumed it received a mild resistance to colds for the following week. "You see," he said in Le Monde Sorcier, "even comfort food can be medicinal." And then there was dessert. No dish embodied the culinary ethos of Beauxbatons more completely than Nuage de Merlin, or Merlin's Cloud. A dessert so delicate it could not be touched by utensils. Students learned to inhale its floating morsels directly, watching them drift from plate to lips like dandelion seeds on the wind. Baked using an anti-gravity spell woven through egg whites, Nuage de Merlin hovered 3 inches above its golden saucer. It shimmered like glass, and with the first taste, lifted the diner momentarily off the floor. The levitation was gentle and brief, no more than 10 seconds, but profound. Witnesses in the dining hall watched as students rose ever so slightly above their seats, shoes barely leaving the ground, as if tasting joy itself. Some giggled mid-air, others cried. And though there is no known documentation in the Hogwarts library, Madame Maxime once allowed Albus Dumbledore to witness the phenomenon. He returned, reportedly speechless, and told McGonagall, "There are meals that remind you of life, and then there are meals that remind you of flight." Each season brought a new philosophy to the plate. In autumn, dishes were designed to mirror the forest's fading leaves and the melancholy of shortening days. Pumpkin velouté glowed with amber enchantments that flickered in candlelight, while cinnamon-spiced pear galettes carried whispers of lullabies sung by invisible voices. In spring, renewal was the theme. Asparagus with mint snow was served on levitating platters shaped like butterflies, Students could pluck their food from mid-air, laughing as the plates darted playfully. Among the more extraordinary culinary traditions of Beauxbatons was the Banquet du Miroir, held once a year in the Hall of Reflections. For this event, students prepared the meal themselves under the tutelage of the school's head chefs, but with a twist. The dishes had to reflect not only the season, but also the student's personal memory. Using the ancient enchantment gustam, a spell that allowed food to taste of a specific recollection, students conjured childhood birthdays, snow-covered mornings, first kisses, or even family recipes, long lost to time. One student, Marianne Roux, became famous in her year for crafting a raspberry tart that tasted unmistakably like the first hug after surviving dragonpox. Her classmates fell silent upon tasting it. Even the normally reserved Professor Brousseau paused mid-bite and whispered, "You have made grief taste like grace." That evening, the dining hall shimmered not only with enchanted starlight, but with the invisible resonance of hundreds of memories reborn on the tongue. Number 18, the Pearl Salamander. Of all the magical academies scattered across Europe, Beauxbatons Academy of Magic, known in Russian as Chambaton, remains the most enigmatic. Nestled in the Pyrenees Mountains of southern France, this school of elegance and precision harbours secrets rarely shared beyond its alabaster gates. While Hogwarts is known for its proud lion and Durmstrang bears the imposing symbol of a double-headed eagle, Beauxbatons' crest features a creature far more mysterious, the Pearl Salamander. In the wizarding world, symbols carry weight, and no symbol in magical academia stirs as much intrigue as this gleaming amphibian of fire and enchantment. Legends whisper that the Pearl Salamander is no mere representation of spirit or ambition. It is said to be real, alive, ancient, and possibly immortal. According to records kept in the Grand Library of Marseille, the first Pearl Salamander appeared in the year 1290, when the Beauxbatons Château was still under construction. A young witch named Lucienne Devereux, one of the first members of the faculty and a renowned elemental mage, was meditating near the hearth of the main entrance. As her magic stirred the flames, something extraordinary happened. A creature shimmered into view, not born of flesh, but of flame and light, its skin glistening like opal, its eyes burning white with ancient wisdom. The creature did not flee when approached. Instead, it curled in the fireplace, as if it had always belonged there. That night, the temperature in the castle dropped suddenly, and the unfinished stone walls threatened to freeze the workers to the bone. But the fire, sustained by the presence of the Pearl Salamander, burned steadily through the night. Masons and charmwrights swore they felt no cold while near the hearth. Beauxbatons was saved from winter's wrath by this guardian of flame. The tale was so compelling that Apolline Delacour, grandmother of Fleur Delacour, later wrote in her journal, "My grandmother told me of a creature whose beauty made grown men weep and whose warmth reached straight to the soul. It was not a pet nor a beast, it was something sacred." Though her journal was never published in full, fragments of it were quoted in a 19th century magical bestiary titled Beasts Beyond Flesh by Thaddeus Spinell, who claimed to have once glimpsed a descendant of the original salamander during a midnight tour of the school. The salamander became the official symbol of Beauxbatons in 1322, when the first class graduated. The crest, carved above the grand entrance in enchanted mother of pearl, shows the creature coiled in a spiral of flame, its tail forming the letter B. In the early 1600s, magical artisans embedded the crest with charmed pearl dust, causing it to shimmer at sunrise. No two students see the exact same hue. The color shifts with the viewer's magical aura, a sign of the salamander's ongoing connection to the spiritual energy of the academy. But the most astonishing part of the legend is not just its beauty or warmth. It's the belief that the Pearl Salamander feeds on pure, magical energy. Not wand spells or hexes, but the raw, unshaped current of magic that pulses through exceptionally gifted witches and wizards. Some scholars even speculate that students of unusual magical potential unwittingly nourish the salamander, which in turn stabilizes the ambient magic within the castle's walls. Saint-Corvaisier, former headmaster of Beauxbatons and member of the International Confederation of Wizards, once gave a rare interview in La Gazette Sorcière where he stated, "There is a reason Beauxbatons produces witches and wizards of grace and clarity. The salamander is not just a symbol, it is a presence. It watches, it teaches, it listens, and it burns." Corvaisier refused to elaborate further, and shortly after the interview, access to the Salle du Feu, known in English as the Hall of Flame, was even more tightly restricted. The Hall of Flame is a room shrouded in silence and reverence. It is not on the usual student maps. Hidden behind a wall of rose quartz near the eastern tower, it opens only to those bearing the approval of the headmistress. Inside, the temperature fluctuates according to the creature's mood, and the air vibrates with subtle, arcane harmony. There, behind silver-veined crystal panes, lie the descendants of the original salamander, each about the size of a curled cat, each glowing softly like embers at dusk. They do not move often, but when they do, the stone itself seems to shift in deference. Only upper-year students with exceptional academic standing and a spotless conduct record are granted access to the Hall of Flame. Even then, they are forbidden from bringing their wands. It is said that the salamanders dislike artificial magic and only respond to the wizard's essence. In rare instances, the creatures have moved toward a student, touching their palm with a flickering tongue of heat. This is seen as a blessing, and such students are almost guaranteed positions in the French ministry or prestigious magical research guilds. One of the most famous examples is the enchantress Sabine Lenoir, inventor of the Whisper Cloak, who graduated top of her class in 1871. She reportedly spent 3 nights a week in the hall during her final year. Her letters, preserved in the Arcanum archives in Dijon, mention the salamanders often. Their eyes know what we cannot admit. I felt my thoughts quiet when I was near them. They burned away my fear. Sabine never married, dedicating her life to magical innovations. In her will, she bequeathed her magical instruments to Beauxbatons with the stipulation that they remain stored near the Hall of Flame. No student has ever claimed to see the original salamander again. Some believe it vanished into the stones upon completing its duty. Others think it evolved into something no longer perceivable by human senses. But the school records a curious phenomenon. Every 25 years, on the anniversary of the school's founding, the fireplace at the main entrance ignites spontaneously, even when no logs have been placed there. The flame dances in iridescent colors, blue, white, pink, and gold, and those who witness it speak of dreams filled with voices they do not recognize and places they have never seen. These visions, documented by magical psychologists such as Professor Émile Chastel, often feature recurring symbols, winding rivers of light, trees whose leaves sing, and a vast library where books write themselves. Chastel's theory, published in The Mind Beyond Wand, posits that the salamander is a spiritual creature linked to a higher magical plane, and that it uses fire not just as sustenance, but as communication. The salamander's flame, he writes, is not heat but language. It speaks in warmth and silence. In the Beauxbatons curriculum, the salamander is referenced only sparingly. First-year students learn a sanitized version of the legend in their History of Magic class, taught by the elegant Professor Mireille Duclos. The textbook used, L'Origine Mystique de Beauxbatons, mentions the creature in a single paragraph, dismissing it as a metaphor for inner light and nobility of purpose. But senior students know better. The older they get, the more they notice the subtle architecture of the school itself. Flame-shaped window arches, fire motifs on floor tiles, the way the lanterns seem to flicker even when windless. All reminders of what lies at the heart of the academy. Even the school's musical traditions pay homage. During the Winter Solstice Gala, the final choral piece is always Chant du Feu, composed in 1452 by Sylvain Rousseau, a student who vanished the day after she first entered the Hall of Flame. Her song is haunting, sung in a forgotten dialect of Occitan, and its lyrics are rumoured to be transcriptions of what she heard inside the hall. The closing lines, roughly translated, read, "In warmth I found myself unmade, reborn in shimmer, breath of jade." Rumours have occasionally surfaced of attempts to smuggle a salamander out of the school, usually by misguided collectors or rogue scholars. None have ever succeeded. The most famous incident occurred in 1937 when a disgraced British magi zoologist named Percival Dawn attempted to seduce a seventh-year Beauxbatons student into sneaking him into the hall. Dawn disappeared 3 weeks later, and his journal, later found in the Alps, ended abruptly with the words, "The flame knows." Students at Beauxbatons wear uniforms of sky blue silk, enchanted to resist heat and cold. Few know that this tradition also honours the salamander, whose own fire is said to burn not with destruction, but with purification. Every graduating student receives a token, a single pearl embedded in a brooch or ring, infused with flame magic from the hall. These pearls are not only beautiful, but protective, warding off magical illness and mental instability, though this is never publicly acknowledged. When Fleur Delacour arrived at Hogwarts for the Triwizard Tournament, she bore a ring with a faintly glowing pearl. She never spoke of its origin, but Dumbledore is recorded as having looked at it for a long moment during the welcoming feast. Minerva McGonagall later wrote in her notes that the pearl shimmered like something alive, and for a moment the room seemed warmer. To this day, Beauxbatons continues its legacy not just through academics but through reverence. The salamander is not just a symbol, it is a guardian, a whispering memory of fire that teaches students grace, balance, and awe. In a world of wand-waving and incantations, the Pearl Salamander reminds witches and wizards that some magic is not meant to be wielded, but witnessed. Number 19. Scent-based grading system. In the soft golden light of the southern French hills, nestled between lavender fields and ancient stone bridges, stood the grand palace of Beauxbatons Academy of Magic. Its walls shimmered faintly in the sunlight, infused with centuries of enchantments and pride. Unlike the chilly grey towers of Hogwarts or the sombre fortresses of Durmstrang, Beauxbatons pulsed with art, warmth, and elegance. But beyond its graceful halls and marble-floored classrooms, the most peculiar aspect of the academy was not its beauty. It was how it judged its students. No quills dipped in red ink, no screeching owls delivering shameful test results. Instead, Beauxbatons graded its students through scent, whispers of perfume conjured from magic itself. The first time a visiting Hogwarts professor witnessed this tradition, it left him dumbfounded. Professor Vector, who had come to exchange arithmetic methods with Madame Clary, the head of Beauxbatons' Department of Magical Calculation, stood frozen when a faint mist of peppermint and old parchment floated above a young witch's desk. The girl, Elise Laurent, had just completed her final theory exam in spell-weaving. Madame Clary, with a wave of her slender wand, conjured a spiral of pale smoke above Elise's parchment. The scent drifted forward, a delicate blend of mint, chamomile, and warm cedar wood. It meant clarity, precision, and a deep-rooted understanding of magical structure. The tradition, known in Beauxbatons as la brume de réflexion, the mist of reflection, was believed to originate from a 15th-century charm created by founder Apolline Delacour's great-grandmother, a perfumer and enchantress named Mariette Duval. Mariette believed that emotions and knowledge intertwined so deeply in magic that they could not be separated, and that a student's state of mind was as important as their intellectual achievements. Le parfum ne ment jamais, she wrote in her private journals. The scent never lies. These words were engraved above the door of Beauxbatons' Grand Hall to this day. For students, the moment of fragrance was both exhilarating and terrifying. They would sit in silence after an exam, parchment still warm beneath their fingers, waiting for the teacher's wand to rise. No words were spoken, no facial expressions betrayed the outcome. Then, gently, the magical smoke would begin to curl upwards. A faint trail of lemon might bring relief. It symbolized potential and fresh insight. A waft of cinnamon might mean creativity and ambition. But the most feared aroma, one that made even the bravest flinch, was sulfur. Sharp, stinging, and unmistakable, the scent was reserved for those who had attempted to deceive the test itself, whether by copying from another or crafting fake answers with spell-aided manipulation. A tale that still lingered in hushed voices among Beauxbatons' corridors was that of Bastien Marchand, a bright but arrogant student in the 1990s. Bastien had been known for his daring and his charm, often quoting famous wizards and dazzling professors with his wit. But during his final history examination, his arrogance caught up with him. As the class ended and silence filled the room, his professor conjured the broom. A foul stench of smoke and sulphur rose into the air. Bastien's face paled. He had enchanted his quill to write excerpts from his textbook on command. That one scent followed him like a curse throughout his final year. No one looked at him the same after that. Even Madame Maxime, who rarely voiced disappointment, was heard murmuring, "It is not the knowledge if it is stolen." Unlike Hogwarts' rigid OWL and NEWT grading scale, Beauxbatons never posted scores. There were no rankings, no leaderboards, no houses competing for trophies. Feedback was personal and experiential. It required students to reflect on what the scent meant, not just how they performed, but how they felt, how they approached the challenge, and what their intentions were. A student who received the scent of rosewood knew they had written with care and compassion. If the fragrance was bitter orange, it suggested an unpolished idea with potential, still too green to bloom. Claire Dubois, a Muggle-born witch from Marseille, once described how this method changed her understanding of education. "At first I was terrified," she later told the Daily Prophet. "I thought they would laugh at me for not knowing magical history, but after my first charms exam I smelled jasmine. Madame Lévesque said it meant I had grace in my incantations. No one had ever told me that before. It wasn't about being right, it was about being present." Beauxbatons professors underwent specialized training to interpret the scents. Each teacher cultivated their own library of olfactory charms, and the art of interpreting the magical aromas was passed down through mentorship, not textbooks. "To smell a student's thoughts is a sacred responsibility," wrote Professor Hugo Lemoyne, who taught potions for over 3 decades. He believed that scent revealed not only the results of an exam, but a student's relationship with the subject, whether they feared it, resented it, or truly loved it. The system inspired not fear, but curiosity. Students whispered excitedly in the courtyards after exams, asking one another what they had smelled. "I got wild strawberries," one might say, to which another would grin knowingly. Strawberries meant innovation. Clove meant depth. Vanilla, oddly enough, meant overconfidence masked in charm. A teacher's subtle smirk while conjuring vanilla was often the gentlest of rebukes. One of the most touching stories came from the case of Mathieu Bellerose, a shy boy with a stutter and a love for care of magical creatures. His classmates often overlooked him, and even some teachers misunderstood his hesitation as disinterest. But during the mid-year evaluation, when he presented his findings on unicorn migratory patterns, the mist above his desk filled the entire room with the scent of lily of the valley, symbol of purity and quiet brilliance. The silence that followed was not awkward, but reverent. For the first time, Mathieu walked to his seat with his shoulders straight. Unlike written grades, the fragrance could linger in memory. Years later, alumni would say they still remembered the scent from their best exam. Celeste Renard, a celebrated curse breaker working in Egypt, claimed that every time she smelled sandalwood, she was transported back to her transfiguration final. It wasn't just that I did well, she said. It was that I felt connected to the magic, like I belonged. Some critics in the wider wizarding world found the system absurd. Rita Skeeter once wrote a scathing article in Witch Weekly titled Perfume and Pretension, Beauxbatons' silly scent scheme, but those who had truly experienced it knew its power. Hermione Granger, after visiting Beauxbatons as part of a diplomatic delegation in 2007, admitted to being impressed. "I thought it was fluff at first," she confessed in an interview, "but it makes so much sense. If education is about growth, why are we measuring it with numbers?" Even within the magical smoke, subtleties emerged. A perfume could blend two meanings, such as rosemary and lavender, which together suggested a brilliant student who needed emotional balance. In rare cases, no scent would appear at all. These moments were considered the most dangerous, not because of failure, but because they indicated that the student had hidden their true self from the magic. Such cases were always followed by personal meetings with the headmistress, not punishment, but reflection. Madame Olympe Maxime, in one of her final addresses before retiring, spoke of the system as an enchantment of empathy. She believed that Beauxbatons had a duty not just to create skilled witches and wizards, but conscious ones. "You do not conquer the world with power," she said. "You move it with presence. Our mist tells us where the soul truly rests." The only time the system faltered was during the wartime years when magical instability made scent interpretation difficult. Even then, teachers adapted. They learned to look for essence beneath chaos, and scents grew darker: tobacco, pine smoke, iron. It was said that during an especially tense year in 1942, the head of magical ethics, Madame Fournier, wept openly when a student's mist turned into the smell of blood and lilacs. The girl had lost her family to the war and written an essay on peace that would later be published in wizarding journals. The exam rooms at Beauxbatons were built with high ceilings not only for grandeur, but for scent. The mist was designed to rise and vanish slowly, absorbed by invisible enchantments woven into the beams. Students sat beneath skylights watching the patterns curl and fade. Some said the smoke spoke as much to the sky as it did to the teachers. To this day, Beauxbatons graduates are known not just for their polish, but for their intuition. They listen differently, they observe with care, and they rarely rush to judge. For them, knowledge was never just about facts. It was about fragrance, memory, and the echoes of understanding that followed long after a lesson ended. Perhaps it's true then what the old walls of the academy whisper, that the purest wisdom cannot be seen or heard, only breathed in. Number 20, Enchanted, Letter, Writing. Of all the arcane wonders hidden in the quiet corridors of magical education, few are as overlooked and as bewitchingly beautiful as the discipline of lettres enchantés, or enchanted lettering, taught exclusively at the Académie de Magie Beauxbatons. Nestled within the misty valleys of the Pyrenees, this subject has remained one of the most closely guarded traditions of French magical heritage. Neither taught at Hogwarts nor at Durmstrang, enchanted lettering remains a mystery to most British wizards. Yet among the soft-spoken courtyards and rose-twined balconies of Beauxbatons, it is treated with reverence, a sacred extension of the soul through ink, paper, and spellcraft. From the first year of study, Beauxbatons students receive quills made from the tail feathers of Rossignol Enchanté, the enchanted nightingale, a magical bird known to sing in moonlight and whose song lingers in ink when used properly. Students are instructed not merely to write, but to compose emotions, fragrances, and images into their letters. The very act of communication becomes, quite literally, an act of enchantment. As Madame Héloïse Lenoir, the long-serving professor of the course, says in her lecture notes, "Un mot n'est jamais seul. Il est toujours accompagné d'un parfum, d'un souvenir, d'une lumière." A word is never alone. It always carries a scent, a memory, a light. Imagine a letter that does not begin with "dear," but rather begins with the soft scent of lavender, rising off the parchment, a warm breeze that rustles unseen fields, and a line of script that gently unfurls into a cascade of violet petals. This is not an exaggeration, but a common assignment in the second term. The ink used, brewed with moonlit poppies and dragonfly wings, glows faintly and reacts to the reader's touch, pulsating gently with colour when emotions are particularly strong. In the second year course, students are taught to encode emotional undertones, grief, longing, joy, within the very fibre of the paper, which then releases subtle auras that colour the reading experience. One particularly talented student, Margot Delacour, niece of the famed Fleur Delacour, composed a letter to her sister during her fourth year that became something of a legend in the school. As the reader unfolded the parchment, the scent of freshly baked madeleines and orange blossom wafted from it. A soft melody, Debussy's Clair de Lune, played so quietly that it seemed to echo from memory itself. The letter expressed simple homesickness, but every word glistened with longing. As her professor noted, Margot wrote not to inform but to reach. That is the essence of Lettres Enchantées. This subject is not just about beauty, however. It is regarded as a discipline requiring discipline, structure, and control. The emotions woven into letters must be carefully measured. Too much sorrow can overwhelm a reader, plunging them into weeks of melancholy. Too much joy, and the paper may burst into radiant sparks. The 2003 incident with Claude Beaumont, a second-year student who tried to embed a sonnet of pure bliss into a letter to his grandmother, resulted in the owl spontaneously combusting mid-flight from the intensity of the magic. It took the Care of Magical Creatures department 3 weeks to comfort the rest of the owlery. The course itself is divided into 5 stages: l'expression, l'évocation, la couleur de l'âme, la respiration du papier, and finally l'écriture vivante. Each stage unlocks a different layer of enchantment. In l'évocation, students are taught to pull fragments of personal memory into the ink. In la respiration du papier, they learn how to imbue parchment with the rhythm of breath so that the paper seems to rise and fall as one reads it, mimicking the natural cadence of a speaker. By the time students reach l'écriture vivante, they are capable of creating documents that pulse gently with the magic of life itself. An unforgettable example was the final project submitted in 1999 by student Armand Rousselet. His letter was addressed to his estranged father, a former duelist who had abandoned magical society after a scandal. The parchment trembled when held, as if nervous to be read. As it opened, the scent of burnt ash and rain filled the air, followed by the image of a chessboard slowly fading into view. The letter's message was simple. I still remember the games. But the weight of history, of yearning, of broken traditions, made readers weep. That parchment is now kept in a glass case in Beauxbatons' Hall of Memory, not because of the words, but because of what they did. Madame Lenoir often reminds students that the practice of enchanted lettering is not for the careless or the loud-hearted. A shout, she once said, may shake a mountain, but a whisper that blooms with colour, that can change the world. The discipline has led many alumni into careers as diplomatic scribes, emotional mediators, or magical novelists. Indeed, the renowned French author Etienne Marquet, whose book Les Saisons Perdues was shortlisted for the Magical Quill Prize in 2015, attributes his literary talents entirely to his training in Lettres Enchantées. There is also an underlying philosophy behind the subject, one that Beauxbatons holds dear. Unlike other schools that emphasize dueling, transfiguration, or potions, Beauxbatons fosters a belief that true magic lies in the act of communication. The written word, they claim, is a living creature, and the hand that writes wields more than a quill. It wields a wand of intimacy. Professor Lenoir once described the act of enchanted writing as giving voice to silence and silence to noise. This philosophy reflects itself even in school traditions. Each spring during the Fête des Plumes, students release their best enchanted letters into the wind, trusting the breeze to carry them to their intended recipients. Some are never found. Others have turned up years later in the most unusual places, tucked into the roots of the whomping willow, drifting along the canals of Venice, or once, astonishingly, clutched in the paw of a sphinx in the Egyptian desert. These letters, faded yet fragrant, still bloom with meaning, their paper soft as sighs, their ink alive. Not every student masters the art. It is considered a mark of maturity, not intelligence, to succeed in lettres enchantées. A fifth-year student, Camille Giroux, once confessed, "It wasn't until I had my heart broken that I could write anything worth reading." The faculty sees emotional experience not as weakness, but as the inkpot from which real letters must draw. That is perhaps why Beauxbatons students are often said to carry their feelings not in their hearts, but in their handwriting. The ministry once attempted to adapt the course for official use in magical correspondence, hoping to bring emotional clarity to dry memos and legal parchments. However, the attempt failed. Letters that tried to combine bureaucratic tone with emotional enchantment became either unintelligibly sentimental or dangerously unstable. One memo about cauldron thickness ended with the reader breaking into tears over their childhood dog. Since then, lettres enchantées has remained the province of the poetic, the personal, and the profoundly human. The spells used in the course are subtle. Not the wand-waving sort, but whispered incantations that shape emotion like clay. The spell Soufflet d'âme is taught in the third year, allowing the writer to breathe part of their essence into the letter. Used improperly, it can leave the writer feeling exhausted for days. Used wisely, it lets the reader feel the warmth of the sender's presence across continents. Fleur Delacour herself used this charm in her correspondence with Bill Weasley during the Second Wizarding War, embedding letters with calm, hope, and the faint scent of her favourite rosewater perfume. The enchantments are woven not only into the ink, but into the rhythm of the text. Metre, cadence, even the shape of the letters on the page affect how the spell manifests. Some students compare it to musical composition. Notes of longing are embedded in syntax, chords of memory in paragraph breaks. When read aloud, the paper hums faintly as if pleased to be heard. In the Beauxbatons library, an entire wing is dedicated to the archives of enchanted letters from centuries past. Some date back to the 1300s and are still decipherable, their emotions as vivid as the day they were written. Visitors are cautioned not to open more than 3 letters per hour, as the emotional impact can be overwhelming. One letter from 1471, a farewell from a dying knight to his lover, has been known to cause readers to weep uncontrollably for hours, even if they cannot read Old French. There is an ethical code as well. Enchanted letters must never be forged or falsified. Doing so is not only a betrayal of the subject's principles, but a magical crime. One former student, expelled in 1897, attempted to manipulate an ex-lover through fabricated letters. The spell backfired. The ink turned to blood, the paper to ash, and the emotions surged so violently that the girl could not read another letter for the rest of her life. Despite its intimacy, the subject has its critics. Some from more martial or analytical schools of magic dismiss it as sentimental nonsense. But Beauxbatons stands by it proudly, citing the words carved into the archway of the enchanted lettering classroom: "Ce que la baguette ne peut atteindre, la plume le touche." What the wand cannot reach, the quill touches. Today, the course remains one of the most popular at Beauxbatons. It is not unusual to see students writing under lilac trees, eyes closed, fingers moving in rhythm to some private melody of the heart. They are not just students, they are composers, artists, messengers of soul and silence. Their letters are not mere parchment, they are spells that live, breathe, and bloom. Number 21, Magical Shadow, Theatre. Every spring, when the cherry blossoms unfurl over the marble terraces of Beauxbatons Academy of Magic, the students and faculty prepare for a most anticipated event, the Spectre Théâtre. This is not a performance in the ordinary sense. It is a magical production without costumes or actors, where shadows take center stage, summoned from the arcane depths of illusionary magic. The tradition, older than the grand staircase itself, is not only a cultural event, but a living exhibition of the harmony between enchantment and imagination. Nowhere in the wizarding world does magic become art quite like it does here, on a silver-lit stage echoing with breath and memory. The Spectre Théâtre was first introduced by Professor Mireille Duvant, a half-Feyler illusionist whose mastery of shadow enchantments earned her the title of Sorcière des Ombres. Her legacy endures through the generations of students who, under her successors, breathe life into living darkness. Unlike British magical theatre, where spells are used to enhance human performance, Beauxbatons' tradition is entirely shadow-bound. Using a combination of obscure illusion spells, notably Umbrae Viventes, a Beauxbaton exclusive incantation, students craft stories told entirely through sentient silhouettes. These shadows glide, leap, whisper, and grieve, sometimes more poignantly than any actor could. Every year the theme shifts, drawn from the vaults of magical history. In 2003, the story of the cursed Rose of Lion was performed, a tale of forbidden alchemy and love between the enchantress Lysandra Moreau and a Muggle botanist. The shadows portrayed every detail, the soft fall of petals from an enchanted rose, the glint of moonlight on forbidden potions, the silent anguish of betrayal. Even students who had laughed through rehearsals found themselves weeping in the audience. "It was like the rose died in my own hands," one seventh-year Juliette de Cressel was overheard saying. The shadows are conjured not through charms alone, but through an intimate connection between caster and thought. Each performer must meditate for days, focusing on the character they intend to manifest. Only then can the shadow respond fluidly to their mental guidance. This is why Spectre Théâtre is not simply a show, but a rite of passage. To summon emotion through a shadow, to infuse it with heartbreak, laughter, fury, is to reveal a sliver of one's soul. It is this vulnerability, this raw communion with imagination, that lends the performance its magic. The realism of the Spectre Théâtre borders on the surreal. The audience doesn't merely watch, they enter the story. The enchantments woven into the stage architecture are layered with sensory spells, so precise that viewers feel the bite of winter air during a scene of war, or the cloying sweetness of a spring garden in bloom. In 2017, when the students recreated the fall of the Glass Citadel, a lost tale from the age of elemental sorcery, those seated in the front row reported the unmistakable scent of cracked crystal and scorched air, though nothing tangible had been burned. Professor Eleonore Virel, the current mistress of illusions, often reminds her students, magic without emotion is mere trickery. What we create must haunt. A former performer herself, she once commanded a shadow to portray the spirit of a betrayed guardian from the Goblin Wars, and several in the audience reportedly felt the weight of grief pressing down on their shoulders like an invisible hand of sorrow. This form of theatre bypasses logic. It dives straight into the senses, into the marrow of memory. Not all performances are historical. Some are born from myth. One of the most beloved productions took place in 2012 when the theatre showcased L'Appel de la Brume, The Call of the Mist, a folktale passed through generations of magical families in Brittany. It told of a spirit in the forest who lured wounded travellers into dreams of their greatest desires only to feed off their hope. The shadows in that play shimmered like smoke. The mist slithered through the audience's feet. One of the viewers fainted, believing for a moment he had seen his lost sister walk across the stage. Every student in their 5th or 6th year is expected to contribute to at least one shadow production. For some, it's a trial by magic. For others, it becomes the highlight of their education. Margot Flaubert, a quiet girl known for excelling in ancient runes but little else, directed the 2021 shadow retelling of the Siege of Saint-Ouen, a brutal magical conflict suppressed by the ministry centuries ago. Her show was so powerfully executed that Professor Virel invited several ministry historians to witness the second performance. "She made shadows scream," a fellow student said, "not with sound, but with silence so loud it rang in your chest." The spells used in the Spectre Theatre are classified as Level 4 creative enchantments, which means they require both skill and approval. Each spell is taught in sequence. First Silhouette Motus, to give motion, then Ombre Sentio, to give emotion, and finally Memorar Scena, the most difficult, which embeds the shadow with a memory frame, essentially locking an entire sequence of events within its shape. Mistakes are common. In 2009, a rehearsal went awry when a memory-locked shadow refused to dissipate, reenacting a scene of magical execution over and over for 6 hours until the charms were reversed. Despite the intensity, students take pride in their roles. Costumes are forbidden, but some wear special robes laced with enchanted silk to aid concentration. There's no spotlight. The entire chamber is bathed in gentle silver light that casts no shadows of its own, ensuring that only conjured figures take form. The stage itself is an architectural marvel, built centuries ago by Nicolas Flamel's grandson, Etienne, who believed that magic must have a home to breathe in. The walls are lined with obsidian, and the floor is embedded with ancient runes that pulse with violet light during performance. The Beauxbatons library holds the original notebook of Professor Duvant, which outlines the theory behind illusionary shadows. "Shadows," she wrote, "are the breath of fear, of joy, of memory. They belong not to light, but to the absence of it. And in absence, the soul whispers." These pages are consulted by top-performing students, especially when crafting complex stories. Her philosophy is that the absence of visible actors forces the viewer to project themselves into the scene, thus forming a personal connection with the story. The Spectre. Théâtre is not confined to the Great Hall alone. On rare occasions, performances take place outdoors, under the full moon. In 1998, on the centenary of Professor Duvant's death, the students staged La Dernière Illusion, the final illusion, in the palace gardens. The shadows danced across hedges, slithered along fountains, and spiraled into the misty woods. It was so convincing that 3 centaur emissaries from the nearby forest emerged mid-performance, believing a real spectre had trespassed on sacred land. While Hogwarts has its Yule Ball and Durmstrang is known for its elemental dueling tournaments, Beauxbatons has claimed a place in magical culture through its commitment to artistry. Even Minister for Magic Hermione Granger once remarked, during a diplomatic visit, "Beauxbatons doesn't just teach spells, it teaches the soul to speak." She attended a shadow production of Les Larmes de la Sorcière, a tragic tale of a woman accused of dark magic during the Great Plague. The shadows moved like ink spilled on parchment, their movements slow, solemn. After the show, Granger was seen wiping her eyes before rising to applaud. Spectre. Theatre is not judged by traditional standards of performance. There are no scores or trophies. Instead, each group receives a single rune etched by Professor Virel onto a stone tile. The rune reflects the essence of their story: sorrow, courage, betrayal, hope, and is stored in the Academy's Gallery of Echoes, a vaulted corridor beneath the main staircase, where generations of tiles glow faintly, whispering the names of forgotten performers and their shadowy masterpieces. One of the most daring shows occurred in 2015 when a student group performed a piece titled Le Pacte Souterrain, a controversial depiction of early alliances between human wizards and mountain trolls during the Goblin rebellions. It was considered taboo, yet the performance was so respectfully executed, the trolls' shadow forms lumbered with astonishing dignity, that it sparked debate among historians and earned the group an invitation to speak at the International Confederation of Wizards. Sometimes the shadows reveal more than intended. In 2020, a performance based on the legend of Melusine, the serpent witch, ended with a shadow-breaking formation and transforming into a new shape, an unknown sigil. The audience, entranced, believed it was part of the act. Only later did Professor Virel confirm the sigil had no known origin and no student claimed responsibility. "Magic," she said, "has its own memory. Sometimes it remembers things we do not." Despite the artistry, the Spectre Théâtre is also an exercise in discipline. It requires intense concentration and emotional clarity. A shadow not properly connected to its caster can fray, twist, or collapse entirely. The experience can be draining. Several students spend days recovering, drinking calming potions and reflecting in the Moonlight Garden, a secluded area behind the northern wing where the first Spectre Théâtre was performed. To the students of Beauxbatons, the Magic Shadow Theatre is not just entertainment. It is a mirror. The figures that walk the stage may be fiction, but the emotions they stir are real. They teach the young witches and wizards how to conjure responsibly, how to weave stories without words, and how to face their own fears reflected in black silhouette. Every spring, the stage reopens like a book waiting to be read. And in that delicate flicker of living shadow, the legacy of Beauxbatons breathes anew. Number 22, The Trial of the Moon Tower. Under the shimmering veil of moonlight that blanketed the mountains of southern France, Beauxbatons Academy of Magic stood in dignified silence. Unlike Hogwarts, with its roaring house rivalries and bustling common rooms, Beauxbatons thrived on grace, secrecy, and selective grandeur. It had no houses, no colours of loyalty stitched into student robes, yet buried in its marble heart was a tradition far older than sorting hats or house cups, a whispered rite known only to a chosen few, the trial of the Moon Tower. Once every 3 years, when the moon hung impossibly full and silver in the velvet sky, a spectral tower would rise from the ancient gardens behind the palace. No professor summoned it, no charm evoked its shape. The tower emerged of its own accord, a consequence of forgotten magic and promises sealed centuries ago. Students would wake to its presence as if waking from a dream. And always the headmistress would know whom it had called. The Moon Tower's origins had faded into myth, but old volumes hinted at its creation during the reign of Queen Mélisande de Mirecourt, a powerful enchantress who ruled both the academy and the surrounding valley during the 13th century. She was said to have conjured the tower after losing her son in a war waged by wizards whose hearts had turned cold. Mourning and furious, she sealed the tower with her own grief and love, willing it to test only the most complete souls, minds sharp, hearts open, and courage unwavering. The tower had 3 levels, each devoted to a different virtue: reason, compassion, and bravery. A student chosen to enter would have to face all 3 alone, without guidance, without wandless interference, and with no assurance that they would return unchanged. It wasn't compulsory, it wasn't safe, but it was an honor whispered about in the halls like sacred fire. In the winter of 1989, when snow still clung to the laurel hedges and candles flickered through frost-covered windows, a girl named Solène Durand was called. Her invitation had come not in parchment or proclamation, but in the reflection of the moon on her water goblet. That night, the tower shimmered into existence, tall, narrow, laced in ivy that breathed like lungs. No door, just a narrow bridge of glass forming beneath. Her feet as she approached. Solène was 17, quiet, brilliant, and painfully human. She stepped inside with nothing but her wand and a ring her mother had left her. The first level, reason, looked like a library at first glance. Shelves from floor to ceiling, books whose titles changed when she blinked. But the room twisted as she moved, bending physics and thought. Time stuttered. She was forced to solve puzzles made of shifting stars and riddles spoken by her own reflection, which mocked and flattered in equal measure. Her wit had always been her sword, but now it became her compass. The final trial of reason was a memory of her father's betrayal, one she had buried long ago. He had been a wizard who abandoned his family in favor of forbidden magic, and the tower resurrected his voice in perfect cruelty. It wasn't real, but it could break her just the same. Solène had to argue with his ghost, pick apart the logic of his choices until the tower released her with silence. Compassion came next, and the room was a garden drowning in winter. At its center, 3 animals shivered in cages of ice, a fox, a raven, and a wounded deer. A voice, neither kind nor cruel, told her she could only save one. The others would fade. She hesitated, then tried everything she could to melt the cages. Tears became spells, desperation became action. She chose the deer, the most injured, and poured warmth into it until her fingertips bled. When she turned around, the fox and raven were gone, and she wept. But the tower gave her no punishment, only a passage forward. The last level, bravery, was simple in appearance, a hallway with a door at the end. She approached it, but with each step, the hallway grew longer, the light dimmer, her lungs tighter. She heard her fears out loud. Failure, obscurity, death, her mother's voice crying in the dark. The door was not the test. Walking toward it was. Her legs buckled, her breath grew ragged, but she walked, and the door dissolved before her. When Solène emerged from the tower, the moon had begun to set. Her robe was singed at the hem, her hair soaked with sweat. But on her palm was a silver mark, shaped like a crescent, and pulsing gently with her heartbeat. She never spoke of what she saw, not in detail, but she was different afterward. And those who noticed would speak of the moon tower in hushed tones again, until it vanished back into the night. The silver mark was more than a symbol. It granted access to the archives de Lune, a restricted wing of the Beauxbatons library hidden beneath the courtyard. Not even professors could enter without the mark. The archives were said to house knowledge from ages lost, spells not taught in class, prophecies too dangerous to be repeated, letters between founders and creatures of the forest, and formulas capable of unraveling time. In a brief note, scribbled in Beauxbatons, Une histoire élégante, Madame Maxime once remarked, "The moon tower does not choose based on grades or discipline. It chooses those who must know who they truly are. Some return radiant, some return haunted, but none return unchanged." During the 2001 trial, a boy named Hugo Chevalier went missing. He was last seen entering the tower after a storm, lightning still licking the peaks above. The tower vanished 2 hours later. For 3 days there was panic, searches, scrying spells, divination circles. But on the 3rd night, Hugo reappeared on the academy steps, clothes dry, eyes glowing faintly silver. He bore the mark on both hands. No student had ever received 2. He refused to speak for a month. It was later discovered that Hugo had written pages and pages of magical theory no one else could decipher. Diagrams that danced when touched. He'd mapped part of the tower, or perhaps something older that lay beneath it. Some believed the moon tower wasn't a building at all, but a being, a sentient memory designed to judge those who wandered too close to enlightenment. In 2010, Headmistress Fontaine denied the existence of the tower entirely during an interview with Le Monde Magique, claiming there is no such thing as the moon tower. Our school believes in education, not myths. 2 months later, her niece Camille was seen walking out of the forest, barefoot and bearing a silver handprint. From time to time, the Beauxbatons curriculum brushes against the tale in careful terms. Professor Lavelle's lecture on abstract transfiguration once featured a diagram resembling the 3 levels of the tower, though she dismissed the comparison. And in the divination classroom, there's a tapestry behind a locked cabinet that glows during the full moon, stitched with 3 animals and a door. Students whisper theories that the tower is alive, that it feeds on memory, that it appears only when the magical world is about to change. They collect the stories like charms. Amélie Delacroix defeated her own doppelganger on the reason floor. Margot Renier brought her dead brother back for an hour during compassion. Pierre Drouet ran into a corridor filled with inferi during bravery, and never turned back. But despite the legends, despite the silver fingerprints and trembling voices of those who passed the test, the tower has never hurt a student who wasn't ready. It does not deceive, it reveals. And revelation is a dangerous magic. What sets the Moon Tower apart from any other magical trial is not its intensity, but its purpose. It exists outside of curriculum, outside of ambition. It does not award grades or trophies. The reward is knowledge, yes, but of the self first, and then of the world. This is a challenge few wizards ever face, even into old age. In a hidden corner of the Archives de Lune lies a journal, bound in star-charred leather, written by a girl named Elise Moreau in 1843. She wrote, "The tower did not test me. It showed me who I was before I was born." And beside this entry is an inked image of the moon. Beneath it, a single line, "I passed, but I mourned what I had to lose to do so." This duality, the wonder and the weight, is what defines the trial. Each student enters with the expectation of victory. Most leave with the knowledge that triumph is not always joyous. The tower gives no hints, no rehearsals. It selects, it tests, it remembers. Even today, some Beauxbatons graduates wear gloves not out of style, but secrecy. The mark is not always welcomed in adult circles. Those who bear it are watched, feared, respected. They know things others don't. They've seen what lies behind the mind, beneath the heart, beyond the edge of courage. In Wanderings of a Wizarding Youth, author Léonard Lemaitre claimed to have broken into the archives and touched one of the tower-born manuscripts. "It hummed in my bones," he wrote. "Not like a spell, but like a truth I was not old enough to hold." He never returned to Beauxbatons again. The tower has not appeared since 2018. The moon has risen full many times, and the students wait in vain. Some say it sleeps. Others believe the world has changed too much for it to care. But there is always a quiet watch kept during the winters, in case the ivy starts to breathe and the air begins to shimmer again. Those who know, wait, and those who don't, will. Number 23, Alchemical Duets. At Beauxbatons Academy of Magic, nestled in the Pyrenees and veiled in the morning mist that dances like waltzing spirits above the snow-covered pines, there is a tradition so delicate and rare that few outside the French magical circles have heard of it. This tradition is known as Alchemical Duets, and it remains one of the most captivating practices ever developed in magical education. Unlike standard potion making, which requires solitude, calculation, and a sterile environment, the duets demand something far more elusive, emotional harmony. The students are not just required to combine ingredients, they are required to combine souls. The concept is simple in theory, but deeply intricate in practice. Two students, usually paired by faculty after weeks of observation, are brought into the duet chambers, circular rooms lined with pale marble, enchanted windows that reflect inner emotions rather than weather, and a single cauldron at the center, carved with intertwining rose vines. The pair must create a potion together, not merely through knowledge, but through perfect emotional balance. Every breath must align, every thought must ripple in sync for the potion to hold. In the heart of the potion, there must be unity, as Madame Duplessis, the school's longtime alchemy mistress, once told the class of 1986. The origin of the practice dates back to the 18th century, when Beauxbatons headmistress Corinne Delacroix invited the renowned alchemist Léandre Valois to create a new curriculum that emphasized emotional intelligence as much as magical aptitude. Valois believed, rather controversially, that potions crafted without emotional understanding were inherently flawed. His approach was mocked by the British schools, especially by several former heads of Slytherin House, but Delacroix approved the experiment. Thus, The Alchemical Duets were born and survived for more than 2 centuries, quietly producing some of the most profound potioneers in Europe. The process begins not with ingredients, but with meditation. Students are taught to sit in stillness across from their partner, palms up and eyes closed. It is not enough to know one's partner, they must feel each other's energy, synchronize heartbeats. Only when the cauldron's rim begins to glow with a faint bluish light, an enchantment triggered by emotional resonance, can the first ingredient be added. If the glow falters, the session is stopped. It is not uncommon for students to fail in the first month. Impatience, arrogance, even mild resentment causes reactions from the cauldron that range from turning ingredients to dust to releasing acrid smoke that sings lullabies in reverse. One of the most famous duet pairs was Margot Renaud and Theo Bellamy, who studied at Beauxbatons in the early 1960s. Margot was a quiet but brilliant empath, while Theo was a fiery duelist with a reputation for impulsive outbursts. Initially, the pairing was considered a mistake, but Madame Duplessis saw something others didn't: complementary polarity. Their first attempts were disastrous, exploding tinctures, cauldrons that wept black oil. But over time, Theo learned patience, and Margot learned confidence. By their final year, they had created the legendary Vérité Elixir, a potion so powerful it was said to reveal not just lies, but the emotional intent behind them. Their story is still studied today, and in the current edition of Le Monde des Potions, Margot, now an alchemy consultant for the French ministry, wrote, "Our success was not born in the cauldron, but in the silence between words. I learned more about Theo in the seconds before we stirred than in all our conversations." This level of emotional synergy is not just poetic, it is essential. The magic of the potion responds to the vibration of intention, the hidden music of human connection. Failure, however, can be catastrophic. In 1994, during the same year that Fleur Delacour would later be selected as a Triwizard champion, 2 Beauxbatons students, Alain Moreau and Delphine Claret, ignored warnings about emotional misalignment. They had recently ended a bitter romantic relationship and were paired in a duet as a test of maturity. Delphine agreed, believing herself healed, but Alain still harbored resentment. Midway through crafting a delicate, dreamless sleep draught, the cauldron flared violently. Witnesses say the potion turned white, then gold, then pure black. The resulting explosion shattered 2 tables and turned their hair silver for 3 weeks. The incident is now known as the Claret-Moreau rupture and is used as a teaching moment for all first-year duet students. The emotional aspect isn't the only challenge. Timing is also critical. Each ingredient must be added simultaneously, with one student often crushing petals while the other stirs precisely 3 times clockwise. Even eye contact matters. If one student is distracted or hesitant, the potion may shift entirely in nature. A minor warming balm can become a fever-inducing tonic. In this sense, alchemical duets teach not just empathy, but meticulous observation and non-verbal communication. These are lessons that linger far beyond school walls. Many of Beauxbatons' most celebrated graduates were duet-trained. Camille Durand and Lucas Perrault, who later founded the therapeutic potion institute Maison de l'Elixir, attribute their entire methodology to duet philosophy. "In our healing work," Lucas once wrote, "we always brew together. The body may be healed by one, but the soul needs 2. Their clinic now trains healers in duet techniques, believing that potions crafted with compassion hold longer effects. A recent study conducted by the Magical Institute of Health found that duet-made potions showed 23% higher efficacy in calming hex-induced trauma than solo-brewed equivalents. The Beauxbatons library holds over 1,200 duet recipes, most of which have never been revealed to the public. Some require the pair to be in love, others require forgiveness before the final drop is added. There's even a formula known as the chant de larmes, the song of tears, that can only be completed if both students have cried during the process. The completed potion is said to calm the mind so thoroughly that the drinker forgets the sensation of fear for an entire day. During the 2010 spring term, an unexpected pair, Elodie Martin and Jonas Neuville, shocked the staff by creating a new compound entirely. They had begun with the intention of crafting a heart-strength serum used to stabilize magical pulses after trauma, but halfway through, Elodie noticed a shift in the cauldron's scent, a lilac note that wasn't part of the recipe. Instead of halting, they followed the new path together, synchronizing on instinct alone. The result was Essence de Grâce, now used in some parts of France to help auras recover from the Cruciatus curse. "We let go of the instructions," Jonas later explained. "We followed each other." This unpredictability is part of what makes the discipline so revered. No two duets are ever the same. Even the same pair, repeating the same recipe, will produce slightly different results depending on their state of mind. "The potion remembers," Madame Duplessis is known to say. "It knows if you are pretending." This has led to philosophical debates among scholars. Some argue that duet potions verge into sentience. Others claim they simply reflect the ever-changing nature of emotion. Either way, the results cannot be replicated by machines or spellwork. Of course, some students refuse to participate. Those with high levels of emotional detachment or who have suffered trauma may find the experience overwhelming. The Academy respects this. Alternatives are provided. Traditional brewing methods, supervised one-on-one sessions, or even therapeutic alchemy in solitude. But the opportunity remains open to return. Many do. Often years later, and often with someone they've learned to trust again. There are tales, some whispered with romantic flair, that a few duet pairs fell in love through the process. It is not the goal, but not uncommon. The alchemy of souls tends to soften even the hardest hearts. A quote etched into the duet chamber's inner arch reads, "To brew in harmony is to speak without words, to feel without fear, and to believe without seeing." It is credited to Léandre Valois himself. The British Ministry of Magic once sent a delegation to observe the duet chambers in 1977. According to archived minutes from the Department of Magical Education, the visitors found the practice inefficient, subjective, and dangerously reliant on teenage emotion. However, after returning to London, one delegate, Aurora Greengrass, submitted a private proposal to adopt similar training in the Department of Mysteries. Her request was denied. Yet in an unpublished letter to her sister, later found in the Greengrass estate, she wrote, "What I saw in that marble room changed my view of magic. It was not the potion, but the people. We teach spells, they teach feeling." In 2020, a former duet graduate named Claire Fournier became the youngest ever head alchemist at the French ministry. During her induction speech, she brought up her duet partner, Hugo Lemaitre, who had died the year before in a potions explosion in Eastern Europe. She described their last potion together, a serum designed to treat magical memory loss. "It failed," she said, "because we fought before the final ingredient. He was right. I was proud. The potion turned black and useless." Her voice shook. "That day I learned the true lesson. Magic cannot lie. It shows us who we are." Not every story ends in triumph, but each ends in truth. The duet chambers remain a sacred part of Beauxbatons, not just as a classroom, but as a mirror. The young witches and wizards who enter those pale rooms seeking potion craft often leave having discovered something far deeper, themselves. Number 24, Mirror Mentors. Of all the magical traditions whispered through the walls of European wizarding academies, few are as mysterious and personal as the enchanted mentor mirrors of Beauxbatons Academy of Magic. Nestled in the misty Pyrenees, far from the bustle of Muggle eyes, Beauxbatons is known for elegance, refinement, and a kind of enchantment that lingers in the bones of its marble halls. Yet beneath the surface of its polished floors and rose-tinted windows lies one of its Most quietly profound magical traditions. The moment a fourth-year student receives their miroir gardien, a magical oval mentor mirror. Each mirror is presented in a private ceremony, conducted at dusk in the Salle des Reflets, a domed chamber glittering with candlelight and veiled enchantments. The mirrors themselves hang silently on the curved wall, each housed in a delicate frame carved from albizia wood or stone native to the Pyrenees. Though they appear dormant, they are ancient creations, imbued with a form of semi-conscious intelligence by the earliest founders of Beauxbatons, including the legendary enchantress Clotilde de Giverny. When a mirror is chosen, it awakens only for its intended student. No spell can force it to reflect the face of another. Aurore Lemoine, a fourth-year student in 1986, would later describe the moment she first met her mirror as like being seen by the world for the very first time. Her mirror, framed in pale rosewood with silver inlay, shimmered when she stepped forward. A cold breath of air passed over her skin as her reflection blurred, and then cleared, not as she appeared, but as she could become. The mirror had no voice, yet its surface swirled with symbols, runes, and flickers of light that conveyed its thoughts directly into her mind, almost like intuition turned inside out. Though they do not speak aloud, the mentor mirrors guide with a steady, omnipresent awareness. They observe the student's academic progress, their emotional state, their moral inclinations. During exam season, a student like Aurore might find her mirror fogged over in displeasure when she ignored her arithmancy revision. But when she returned, begrudgingly opening her scrolls and working late into the night, the mirror glowed warmly, tracing gentle reminders along its surface with golden light. One evening, Aurore's mirror pulsed with blue as she studied. A signal she had discovered meant, take a break before you collapse. Some students resented the mirror's persistent presence. Mathieu Fournier, a notoriously rebellious Beauxbatons student from the class of 1993, attempted to hex his mirror to silence it. He had tired of its subtle criticisms and reminders, especially after it turned a deep red hue when he cheated on a charms essay. The spell backfired, as such things tend to do, and his wand erupted in a flash of violet sparks that singed off his eyebrows. His mirror, after a brief moment of silence, shone gold, a rare sign of triumph. That week, Fournier began studying in earnest. His professors noted an almost uncharacteristic improvement, and his mirror became his quietest companion for the remainder of his years. What separates the mentor mirrors from ordinary magical artifacts is not just their intelligence, but their memory. Each one is blank upon awakening, but as the years progress, they begin to reflect not only the student's face, but their progress, their fears, and their moments of quiet victory. Gabrielle Delacour, younger sister of Fleur Delacour, once described sneaking into the Salle des Reflets to see her sister's old mirror after Fleur had graduated. "It still shimmered," she wrote in her diary, "like it missed her. I thought I saw her smile in it just for a second." Indeed, upon graduation, the mirrors darken. Their surface turns a cloudy grey, no longer responding to touch or proximity. But within, they preserve the essence of the student, echoes of their magical potential, their best intentions, the light that flickered within them during those fleeting years. A mirror will never awaken again, even if returned to the chamber. It is said that each mirror contains the purest reflection of the student's soul during the years they were becoming who they would be. Some graduates have admitted to returning secretly to Beauxbatons, standing in the hallway outside the Salle des Reflets, hoping to catch a glimpse of their old mirror in the moonlight. "It's like a piece of myself lives in there," confessed Etienne Beaufort, class of 1978. "The man I was trying to become before the world got in the way." Others never look back, fearful of what their mirror might reveal, or what it might still remember. The tradition of the mentor mirrors began over 7 centuries ago during the directorship of Mélusine d'Argent, a powerful seer who believed that students required more than tutors to excel in the magical arts. They required guidance from a presence that could know them intimately and without judgment. She crafted the first mirror using sand from the beaches of Lac de Gobe and the breath of a lunar serpent, a rare magical creature long since vanished. The mirror was imbued with an enchantment known only to her, now lost to time, that allowed it to bond to a student's essence. It is said that the mirrors are incapable of lying. When a student falls into arrogance, laziness, or cruelty, the mirror dims. In moments of true self-deception, the reflection itself vanishes, replaced by symbols of warning, an ancient Beauxbatons script known only to senior staff. A story circulates among students about Lucy Vasseur, who in 1972 became obsessed with outperforming her peers. She practiced forbidden spells and sacrificed her friendships in pursuit of perfection. One day, her mirror shattered without a sound. Lucy was expelled shortly thereafter. But for those who form a bond with their mirror, the results are often extraordinary. Delphine Ravel, a graduate who went on to become a leading magical healer in Marseille, credited her mirror with helping her overcome severe anxiety. "Every time I felt I couldn't do it," she wrote, "the mirror showed me moments when I had done it, when I had succeeded, when I had stood tall. It gave me memory when I had only fear." Her mirror now rests dormant in the alumni chamber of Beauxbatons, reflecting nothing but faint swirls of rose-gold mist. Professor Émilien Rousseau, who teaches magical ethics at Beauxbatons, has often referenced the mirrors in his lectures. "We are not only watched," he said during a commencement speech in 2004, "we are mirrored. And in the stillness of that reflection we must ask who we are when no one else is watching." It is perhaps the greatest lesson the mirror imparts, not just magical guidance, but moral insight, a silent challenge to be better than one was yesterday. Though the magic behind the mirrors is fiercely protected, fragments of their history appear in old Beauxbatons manuscripts. One passage, attributed to Clotilde de Giverny herself, reads, "The mirror is not a teacher nor a judge, but a shadow of truth made visible. Where the student lies to themselves, the mirror will remain silent. Where the student listens, the mirror sings." This phrase is etched above the door to the Salle des Reflets, reminding all who enter of the weight they carry. At times, a mirror's final reflection has changed lives. In 2012, graduate Adele Jouvet returned to visit her mirror after struggling for years with failure and obscurity in her career. Her mirror, long dormant, flickered for the briefest second as she approached, just enough for her to glimpse herself as she had been: passionate, brave, endlessly curious. That image stayed with her long after the light faded. Within a year, she had founded one of France's most respected magical research initiatives. To some, this phenomenon seems implausible, too poetic for hard magic. But Beauxbatons does not concern itself with proving tradition to the outside world. "We are not Hogwarts," Madame Maxime once famously stated. "We do not measure growth in spells alone." In truth, the mirrors are less about magic than they are about memory and identity and the fragile beauty of who we strive to become. Students are warned early never to depend on their mirrors for answers. They may hint, suggest, or illuminate, but never command. In potions class, for instance, a mirror might reveal the shimmer of a forgotten ingredient at the edge of its frame, prompting a student to remember. But it would never complete the potion for them. This restraint is deliberate. As Professor Rousseau once said, "A mirror that solves everything is a master, not a guide, and we must never become slaves to our reflection." Perhaps the most haunting element of all is that once the mirror darkens, it cannot be restored. No spell, however advanced, has succeeded in rekindling a mentor mirror's consciousness. Some scholars have tried, pouring years of research into the mystery, but the enchantment seems to obey deeper laws, those of time, growth and the end of childhood. And yet, even in silence, the mirrors endure. They are kept in an underground vault known only to Beauxbatons alumni and staff, tended by a quiet order of caretakers known as les veilleurs. The mirrors rest in rows, their surfaces faded, their frames polished. Students visiting decades later sometimes report a strange warmth when they touch the frame of their old mirror. "It knew me," one wrote in the guest ledger, and maybe it still does. Number 25. The Cabinet of Forgotten Spells. Deep within the western wing of Beauxbatons' Academy of Magic, past the gilded corridors and beneath frescoed ceilings that whisper the elegance of centuries, lies a hallway few students dare to tread. Hidden behind a heavy door of pale blue oak, bound with runes that shimmer like moonlight on snow, is a room not listed on any map or school ledger. It is called the Cabinet of Forgotten Spells. Though the name sounds innocent enough, those who've glimpsed what lies beyond its doors know it holds more than dusty tomes and obscure enchantments. It is a sanctuary of suppressed power, the resting place of magic too dangerous, too complex, or too peculiar to be taught in standard classrooms. Madame Héloïse Morveau, Beauxbatons' revered headmistress for over 3 decades, once referred to the cabinet as a necessary silence in an age of noise. Though the quote appears only once in the footnotes of a restricted archive, it has become something of a whispered motto among the senior magisters who oversee the room. The cabinet is said to be older than the western wing itself. Rumours suggest it was moved brick by brick from Beauxbatons' original monastery location in the Pyrenees during the 13th century. Carved into the stone above its door is a line in Occitan: De l'ombre, saber, del saber, poder. From shadow, knowledge, from knowledge, power. Not just any student can enter. Access is limited to those in their final 2 years who have achieved excellence in both magical theory and practical enchantment. Even then, they are only permitted to enter under the supervision of a magister or with written permission from at least 2 department heads. This exclusivity has bred an aura of myth. To walk among the scrolls of the cabinet is to brush against the fabric of magical history that others have deemed too volatile to touch. The books here are not sorted alphabetically nor by type. Instead, they are arranged in a circular pattern by magical resonance. Each shelf hums slightly, as if echoing the incantations it contains. One of the most infamous incidents involving the cabinet happened in 1962 when a student named Guillaume Letton, known for his brilliance and arrogance in equal measure, attempted to invoke a charm titled Umbra Reclamar, the Calling of Shadows. The spell was unearthed from a scroll bound in serpent hide, dated to the late 900s and attributed to a sorcerer named Amédée de Vercors, a reclusive alchemist and former student of Merlin himself. The charm promised protection through obscurity, cloaking its caster in darkness so profound that even dementors would lose their trail. However, what Guillaume summoned instead was a shadow entity that refused to be banished, feeding off the fear it instilled in others. The entity, described in the restricted student report by Magister Beauregard, was a mist without wind, a whisper without voice, a shape without mass that clung to the corridors like a second nightfall. For 3 days, the western wing of Beauxbatons was closed. When the shadow was finally driven back by a coalition of 5 professors using a modified version of Fianto Duri, the spell left a crack in the west wall that no magic could fully repair. To this day, the stone remains faintly blackened. Guillaume was expelled. His name was removed from all honor rolls and his wand was broken in a formal ceremony, witnessed only by the headmistress and his former mentor. He vanished from the magical world soon after, and some believe he left France altogether. Others claim he continued his studies in secret, obsessed with reclaiming the shadow's power. No confirmation was ever made, but his story is retold each year during the orientation of 7th-year students as a somber reminder of what lies behind the cabinet's door. One of the oldest artifacts in the room is the Grimoire of the Sleepless Hour, a book bound in midnight blue leather with no title on its spine. Its pages cannot be turned by hand. They respond only to the magical signature of the reader. The enchantments within are written in multiple languages, including Old Breton, Latin, and a script thought to predate modern runes. Among them is Somnolentia Inversa, a charm that reverses the need for sleep. First documented in 1404, it was used by scholars seeking longer hours of study, but was later outlawed after several users suffered severe psychological breaks, unable to dream or rest even after the charm wore off. Another spell, Ardor Vivens, is etched into a cracked sheet of volcanic glass. It breathes life into inanimate matter, but unlike Pir Totem Locomotor, it grants awareness, not just animation. When tested by a research group in 1811, a marble statue of a lion refused to stop moving, even after the spell was lifted. It ran through the halls of Beauxbatons for 2 days before voluntarily lying down beside the fountain in the winter garden. When asked why it had stopped, it supposedly responded, "Because I remembered I was once still." That statue is now sealed in the cabinet, wrapped in protective charms to suppress any echo of its past motion. There is a reason why these spells are no longer taught. Some magic exists in grey spaces beyond what is useful or safe. The cabinet is not a vault of evil, nor is it a showcase of forbidden curiosity. It is a reminder that knowledge has a price, and that curiosity without restraint can become a blade turned inward. A more recent example involved Colette Vasseur, class of 2003, who attempted to replicate a charm from the cabinet known as Speculum Sensus, the mirror of senses. Designed to project one's own perceptions into another being, it was intended for empathetic training. But Colette miscalculated the incantation's balance, and for 48 hours she experienced her surroundings through the perceptions of a wounded owl she had used as a conduit. The experience changed her. She withdrew from dueling clubs and refrained from casting spells for the remainder of her final year. Her thesis, On the Fragility of Shared Experience in Magical Transferences, received the highest marks ever awarded in the field of magical ethics, and she went on to join the Department of Magical Rehabilitation. But, to this day, she refuses to discuss the full details of what she saw and felt through the owl's mind. "Some truths are feathers," she once wrote in a letter to her former professor, "too light to carry, yet too heavy to drop." Among the eeriest elements of the cabinet is its silence. Unlike the rest of the castle, filled with laughter, whispers, and the shuffle of footsteps, this room absorbs sound. Spells cast within seem muted, footsteps vanish, even thoughts feel oddly hushed. Some scholars believe the room was enchanted to prevent magical resonance from building to dangerous levels. Others suggest it is the natural effect of containing so much unregulated magic in one place. At the center of the cabinet is a podium made of petrified ash wood, upon which lies a single parchment under glass. This document, known only as the Protocol, outlines the rules of engagement within the room. It forbids unsupervised use, duplication of materials, and the transference of spells into external devices like enchanted quills or magical mirrors. It concludes with a line, penned in dark ink that shifts like smoke. Il ne faut pas réveiller ce qui veut dormir. Do not awaken what wishes to sleep. One spell that continues to fascinate researchers is Calces Vulneris, a healing incantation that bypasses physical trauma and directly restores nerve connections. Its success rate is nearly miraculous, but its side effects are unpredictable. Those healed often report visions of other people's pain, sometimes describing vivid scenes of suffering that don't belong to them. One healer claimed to relive a memory of being burned alive in a fire that happened centuries before her birth. The spell remains under lock, studied only by healers of the 3rd rank and above. Some students, even after graduation, remain haunted by their time in the cabinet. Jacques Blanchard, now a professor of magical linguistics, once described the room as a chapel of what could have been. He claims to have encountered a spell called Desiderium, which manifests one's strongest unfulfilled desire as a magical echo. The spell is non-verbal and requires no wand. He saw his long-dead brother appear before him, smiling, unchanged since the day he died. When the image vanished, Blanchard was found collapsed and weeping. He never attempted the spell again. Of course, not all spells in the cabinet are dangerous. Some are simply peculiar or obsolete. There's a charm that changes the flavor of tea depending on the weather outside. Another can conjure miniature lightning storms inside glass bottles. These curiosities remind visitors that forgotten does not always mean forbidden. Sometimes magic is left behind simply because the world moves on and spells once beloved become relics of another age. Every year, the cabinet undergoes a ritual cleansing. This process is overseen by Madame Laveau, the school's archivist in residence, a woman so old that students joke she predates the furniture. She wears robes stitched with thread from unicorn mane and carries a lantern that never dims. During the cleansing, each spellbook is resealed, each scroll re-blessed, and the resonance of the room recalibrated. It is said that if she ever fails to complete the ritual in time, the room itself may forget what it contains and begin casting spells of its own volition. One shelf contains only spells of silence. Among them is Voce-Mort, which erases a spoken word from the memory of everyone who hears it. First developed as a means to contain dark prophecies, it was banned after a prophetess erased the word danger from an entire village's mind. When a dragon escaped from its enclosure days later, the villagers stood transfixed, unable to understand the urgency in the eyes of the fleeing auras. 47 people died. And yet, despite its dangers, the cabinet continues to exist, not because the school is reckless, but because Beauxbatons believes in preserving the full spectrum of magical knowledge. Even shadows belong to the tapestry, said Madame Morveau in her final address before retirement. To erase them is to pretend we are not what we are, light born from the dark. The cabinet is not a prison for cursed words, nor a vault of terrible secrets. It is a mirror held up to the magical world, a reminder of what we've dared, what we've lost, and what we might yet find again. Number 26, Heirloom Wands. In the soft blue mist of the Pyrenees, where the forests seem to hum with magic and the snow glows with unnatural brilliance, lies the grand and mysterious Académie de Magie Beauxbatons. Often overshadowed by the fame of Hogwarts, the French school holds its own secrets, traditions, and customs that run deeper than spellwork or charmcraft. Among these is the quiet but sacred rite of inheritance, the passing down of family wands or baguettes héréditaires, a custom that sets Beauxbatons apart in both purpose and spirit. In Hogwarts, children eagerly await their first visit to Ollivanders, where the wand chooses the wizard, as Garrick Ollivander proudly declares. But at Beauxbatons it is not choice but worth that determines the pairing of wand and wielder. The tradition dates back centuries, well before the modern curriculum, to a time when magical bloodlines were regarded not just with honor, but with fearful reverence. In ancient France, magical families would craft their wands using wood from their own ancestral groves and cores obtained through sacred rituals. These wands were not bought, they were born. Passed down from parent to child or uncle to niece, each wand became a vessel for not only magic, but memory. Beauxbatons embraced this custom with solemnity, elevating it into a defining ritual, the éveil de l'héritier, the awakening of the heir. This ceremonial event is held each autumn beneath the dome of luminescence, a towering structure of enchanted glass that captures the light of the moon and diffuses it into glimmering silver rays. There, before an audience of students and professors alike, a new student stands alone before their family's wand, placed atop a column of carved quartz. No incantation is uttered, no gesture made. The wand itself must stir. If the bond of blood is true and the heart of the student is deemed worthy, the wand will rise into the air and drift gently into the waiting hands of its heir. But the ceremony is not always a celebration. There have been instances, rare but remembered with whispers, when the wand quivers, turns, and splinters itself before the stunned eyes of the crowd. In such cases, the rejection is clear. The student is not deemed fit to wield the legacy. Most such children are given a new wand by the school's master wand-maker, but the shame lingers. Professors try to reassure them that talent matters more than ancestry, yet everyone understands the message a broken wand sends. One such tale still echoes in the halls of Beauxbatons, the story of Camille de la Roche, whose family wand was said to contain the feather of a Therian phoenix, a mythical variant with the power to heal as well as destroy. Forged in the 17th century, the wand was passed down through 9 generations, and its owners were among the most celebrated duelists and diplomats in magical France. Camille, raised with tales of her ancestor Mireille de la Roche's role in ending the blood-pact war, entered Beauxbatons with pride, her family wand sealed in a velvet box wrapped in enchantments of protection. When Camille stepped into the dome, the air grew thick with anticipation. The wand was placed on the pillar, and as she reached out, the lights dimmed. For a moment the wand lifted, hovered, and then fell. No splintering, no flames, just silence and a cold thud. Her father, seated among the audience, turned pale. Later that evening the wand snapped clean in half in the dormitory, unprovoked. Professors interpreted it as a delayed rejection. Camille's arrogance, some said, had corrupted the harmony of lineage. The story serves as a cautionary tale even now. But there are brighter tales too. Louis Bonneval, born of a humble magical family in Bordeaux, was the surprise of his year. His great-grandfather's wand, dormant for 4 decades, shimmered and spun with energy the moment Louis entered the dome. He had never even held it before, having found it locked in a secret compartment after the death of his grandfather. The wand, made of blackthorn and containing a strand of kelpie hair, had once belonged to Marcel Bonneval, a famed seer. Louis had no known talent for prophecy, but after accepting the wand, he began experiencing visions, fragmented at first, then terrifyingly accurate. The wand had not merely awakened to him, it had remembered its former master's gifts and passed them on. Beauxbatons prizes grace, wrote Fleur Delacour in Witches Abroad, but we also prize legacy. There is no greater dance than that of a wizard with his ancestor's wand. Fleur herself was believed to have used a new wand during her Tri-Wizard tournament appearance, but her sister Gabrielle received their grandmother's ivory-handled wand at her own awakening, a moment that made even the usually impassive Madame Maxime smile. The process of bonding with a familial wand does not end with the ceremony. Students must learn to attune themselves to the wand's rhythms. Unlike newer wands, which adapt quickly to a wizard's style, heirloom wands demand discipline. They carry habits from previous masters. Some twitch toward defensive spells if they were held by auras, others lean toward charms if their former owners were healers. A student's magical education at Beauxbatons, therefore, is deeply tied to learning not only the theory of spell work, but also the temperament of their wand. One professor, Madame Valérie Mornon, once claimed, "Each family wand is like a violin passed down from a maestro. It does not simply play, it listens, and if it hears cowardice, it sings no song." Her own wand, a shimmering whitewood piece with a unicorn core, had belonged to her mother, and her dueling techniques were said to echo movements from her family's traditional fencing school. Students lucky enough to be mentored by Madame Mornon often received special guidance in decoding their wand's moods. Interestingly, Beauxbatons maintains a secret chamber beneath the main library where broken heirloom wands are stored, not discarded, not destroyed, stored. Called Le Tombeau des Baguettes, this vault is enchanted with silence and light, a resting place for the wands that could not find a successor. Some believe the wands whisper at night, though this is likely just one of many myths the students whisper to each other after curfew. Still, the idea that every wand carries a fragment of its past lives adds an air of reverence to even the most mundane spells.